Well, let's now turn our attention to other stories. There's been a backlash in Liberia over a comment made by U.S. President Donald Trump, one many say was offensive and condescending. While hosting 5 African leaders at the White House, President Trump told Liberian President Joseph Boakai he was impressed by his strong grasp of the English language after President Boakai mentioned where he was educated. Liberian diplomats and politicians say the comment was inappropriate, especially coming from someone speaking to the leader of an English-speaking country. They've called it dismissive and tone-deaf, given Liberia's deep historical ties to the U.S. Responding to the criticism, the White House Deputy Press Secretary called President Trump's words a heartfelt compliment.
And also, we want to encourage American involvement in the investment in Liberia. Yeah. We'd like to see that happen. We want to work with the United States in peace and security within the region, because we are committed to that. And we just want to thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. It's such good English, such beautiful. Where did you learn to speak so beautifully? Where were you educated? Where?
Yes, sir.
In Liberia.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's very interesting. It's beautiful English.
Sure.
I have people at this table can't speak nearly as well, and they come from.
Now, public affairs analyst Victor Hai joins me in the studio for more on this. Good to have you join us. Such good English. Liberians feel offended by this remark, but President Boakai's team have said they see it more as a compliment. Just maybe Trump was smitten by the different intonation compared to non-speaking African countries. But when you compare, when you consider Trump's previous comments on African countries and then the colonial legacy left by the U.S. organization that colonized Liberia, what is the optics of this, and what do you make of it?
Okay, so this speaks to the stereotype of Africans that you see in the movies, where you have to speak with a certain accent to be an African. Which is
not even African
exactly, most of the time. And if you speak, when you speak like a Nigerian or you speak like a normal African, say, no. In Hollywood, they say, that's not African. That's not an African accent. So that stereotype has been reinforced over time. And you recall the incident with between Chimamanda and the French journalist who was asking for libraries.
Are there libraries in Nigeria?
In Nigeria. These are all the stereotypes. And so for someone like Trump, for instance, I don't want to blame him completely, because this is something that has stayed in their mind, that has been reinforced over time. If not, I mean...
Really, we can't blame... We've seen him do it with the German Chancellor, Merz. He also said, your English is really good. Do you speak as, is your German just as good? But doesn't that also speak to his team, not educating him before going in for this meeting?
He's spontaneous. You see, he's spontaneous. He reacted spur of the moment. But what he forgets is that, and that's what the German president or the chancellor. Did cleverly and nicely. He reminded him about his heritage, that he is also from German heritage. You understand? When you hear a name like Cruz, for instance, you know that that's Spanish. So America is a potpourri of, or some sort of melange of people from different parts and all that. And English, and if you like, to a large extent now, or to and a lesser degree, Spanish, is now, the language that is spoken. But, he ought to have known that Liberia, again, that's why I agree with you that he should have been given the background of where everyone is coming from. But I guess he was shocked to hear someone from Africa speak English that well with a near American accent. And Trump, being who he is, just reacted spur of the moment. And if there's anything you can predict about him, is his unpredictability, which is the fact that he would, it's like what happened with the lady who asked a question about, or who tried to put in their mouth the issue of the Nobel Prize, the correspondent, So
the nomination for
yes,
for
the nomination. You find a situation where, it's like people are just, trying to put words into people's mouths, and that's exactly what.
Let me, because again, the President Bukai has come under some level of criticism too for his response. Some felt that it was too much of the yes sir, subservient kind of response. And then we're also now referencing the meeting or the exchange between President Trump and President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa in May. He also was talking down, on President Cyril Ramaphosa. Just, examine for us, what you make of how African leaders also respond to some of these remarks coming from Western leaders.
I think it's important that while we recognize the fact that America is, a superpower and all of that, we recognize the fact that when we sit at table with them, at that point, you're a sovereign nation. I'm the head of a sovereign nation. You're the head of a sovereign nation. And you carry the sovereignty of your country to that table. So people should not be leaders should not be subservient. You can receive whatever he says, but give back in equal measure respectfully, okay? Because I think a lot of them are afraid. And the problem again you have is that there are certain things you can do with an Obama, for instance, and you know that he would immediately recognize the fact that, okay, he's overstepped his bounds and all that. But with Trump, I'm sorry to use the language, but his actions appear like that of a bully. I'm not, if you understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
You cannot take his personality away from the office. He has carried it into the office.
What we're saying, is it again, maybe it's patient diplomacy, but patient diplomacy that has now been overdone by African leaders?
At that table, it was difficult for them to have reacted otherwise, which was why I brought up that issue, and I think I forgot momentarily, the issue of asking about whether he should be recommended for, what do you call it?
The Nobel Prize.
Nobel Prize. What are you expected to say at that point? Should you now say, I don't think so? You know what I mean? It's part of the diplomacy. So, you know what they say about diplomacy is the art of telling a person to go to hell and you'll be looking forward to the trip. Sometimes you say what you don't mean, or you say what you mean in a way that is completely different. So what the situation they found themselves there in was a very awkward one, and so it was difficult for them to confront and be rather brash in their reaction. What Bukai did was very, very smart. Did you study in Liberia? Of course, yes.
But did he not miss a moment? And this is a question because we understand that there is an unbalanced global governance structure. Yes. We're not kidding ourselves that when we go into the room, we understand the structures. Yes. There's G7. We understand those structures. Yes. But do we also miss the moment where we're able to educate some of these leaders, and then and also missing opportunities to come to the table as equal and strategic partners? Because some have said, look, you could have said, yes, I schooled in Liberia, and take a second or two to lecture him about America's history with Liberia.
Not everyone is a Chimamanda, I want to say. But I agree with you, he could have done that. But you see, that's only after the fact. There's certain things that not everyone is that spontaneous. Not everyone is gifted with that spontaneity or that quick comeback. And so, yes, Bukai, with the benefit of hindsight, like we say, 2020 is perfect vision. He could have done that, but at that moment, it didn't occur to him. And so I'm not going to blame him. He has said it was a compliment. Quite frankly, I think it was a compliment because it meant I never expected, I never expected that much. I remember I said it was a stereotype.
Put you on hold.
It's a stereotype.
And that's why people find, not just Liberians, but Africans find it condescending.
I agree.
That stereotype. And that's where he's speaking from. But to leave the issue of Bukai and just now look at generally how Trump is engaging with Africa. We've seen from visa revision of visa policies to just outright, almost a ban, some immigration categories, and then you find that there's tariff as well because Nigeria aligned with BRICS. Now there is extra 10% tariff. I think we used to have 14%. South Africa 30%, or I think 35% now as well. I mean, what do you make of his engagement with the continent? Okay,
in order to be able to have a proper understanding of this without any sentiments, we have to look at perceptions and perspectives, and I'll explain what I mean. First of all, if you sleep on your rights, what you ought to have done all the while, and you wake up suddenly and you begin to implement or insist on your right, obviously there will be resistance, and people would say, would see things wrong with what you're doing. Now, in terms of what I'm talking about, that's in the realm of perception. Now, is what you're doing right or wrong? But perspective would mean now looking at it from your point of view as well. He's not doing anything he never promised. He talked about making America great. He talked about putting America first. And if you see what he didn't start with Africa, he started with Europe. And so when he went to Europe, he's like, look, all these years we've been carrying the burden of NATO. Okay, we've been spending so much money, you've not been doing anything. It's time to think America, which means let's do what's in the best interest of America. So if you shift perspectives, if you're not looking at him, maybe from a different party and all that, as purely an American, then you would say that what he's doing, what he did with Europe was obviously in America's interest because they kept spending and financing NATO and the others were just relaxed while America carried all of the burden. And now, in talking about reciprocity, I'm not going to lie to you, I've been worried myself before now. Remember there was a time, this is not the first time the issue of reciprocity came up between Nigeria's relations and America. First, it was visa fees. The American visa fee was low compared to the American visa fee some time ago. I don't know whether it was a year or 2 years ago. I can't put my fingers to it, but I remember particularly at the time. And then the Americans jacked it up to make it at par. And then their excuse at the time, or their argument at the time, was reciprocity. They cannot continue to subsidize the rest of the world. They said, and but this is about diplomacy. Allow me land.
We offer just the same thing, 3 months short stay.
I've not talked about the stay yet. I'm talking about the fact that Nigeria as a country has had a history of not reciprocating. Let me talk about America.
Absolutely.
Yes. So it started with a visa fee at the time, and it's like, look, how can we be giving you this low visa fees and you are charging us so much more? And so they slammed us with higher visa fees. Otherwise, how much was it to pay for American visa fees? I thought we would learn from that. Now, they now moved us from 2 years to 5 years. I was just lucky to have benefited from the 5 years because I renewed recently and I got the 5 years. Now, I know how difficult, I've had friends of mine who are coming into this country and they're doing the e-visa thing because even the regular one is so difficult. Anyone will tell you the Nigerian visa, and I sit here as a Nigerian, we are here to analyze and speak the truth. No matter, this is not about propaganda, and I say so because I have facts. Right. Now, the Nigerian visa is one of the most difficult to get, okay? So the e-visa, for instance, sorry, I'll land very shortly. The e-visa, for instance, is just about 3 months maximum. You understand? The 5-year visa or the 2-year visa, the 5-year, I'm not fully aware of that. I only heard them talking about it recently. But the 2-year or regular visa, you have to go to the embassy, and it's such a difficult process.
It's difficult for African leaders to even now negotiate when the goalpost keeps shifting. But we'll see how. I'm told my time is up.
We gave them the excuse. So what I would say as a last word is, I think that we should be more proactive in our approach, so that there are no excuses. But there are underlying factors.
We have to.
We have no doubt behind what has happened. It goes beyond it because they've always tolerated
we'll continue to, a lot to follow up on. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for
Public
having
Affairs Analyst Victor Hai, always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.